Okay, Algebra 1, this is 1.3, Properties of Real Numbers. This is a lot of writing, so I just took a picture of the book. We have several slides of this, and they are starting on page 16. And basically what we're going to talk about is there's several properties that all real numbers follow. They will do this. And so, the first one is called reflexive property. So, in the reflexive property, it just says that any quantity is equal to itself. So what we have here is, as we go along, is we got its name, we got what does it mean in words, or what does it say in words, and then using symbols and the example. So we're not going to necessarily talk. So what we have here is this. We got reflexive property, symmetric property, transitive property, and substitution property. So A equals A. Any number is equal to itself. That's what it says. Symmetric property. If one quantity equals a second quantity, then the second quantity has to equal the other quantity back. So if A equals B, then B equals A. Makes sense. If there's an equal sign, they're equal to each other. Transitive property. The transitive property is if one quantity equals a second quantity and the second quantity equals a third quantity, then the first and the third are also equal. If A equals B and B equals C, that means A is equal to C. Okay? Big long chain can happen there. And substitution property, it says that you can substitute any value for its equal expression or value. If x is equal to 2, that means I can put a 2 anywhere I see an x, or an x anytime I see a 2. That can be going both ways there. So what we have here now is that we got some addition properties. And up above there, they had the additive identity. And the additive identity is 0. Because I can add 0 to any number, and I get the same number back. That means it's an identity. It's the addition identity. And that's what we have there. And then we also have one that's called additive inverse. That means if I add a number and its opposite, you end up getting 0. So A plus negative A is 0. 2 plus negative 2 is 0. Boom. That's what it means. And then we go to this one. And now we're going to talk about some multiplication properties. And they got a little bit of stuff above there that if you multiply a number by something and get its own number back, that's what we have here. And this one, that means n has to be 1. And 1 happens to be, down here, the multiplicative identity. If you multiply anything by 1, you get that number back. We have the property of 0. Multiply anything times 0 is 0. That is the multiplication property of 0. And the multiplicative inverse is basically multiplying something by its reciprocal. 1/2 times 2 over 1 cancels out, it equals 1. And so multiplicative inverses will always multiply to 1. And the last couple things here we're going to talk about before we get some examples here is that you have the commutative property. The commutative property says that if I add 2, 3, or 4 different numbers, that means I can add them in different order. So A plus B is the same thing as B plus A. That's commutative property. Then we go to the associative property. So the associative property is that when you're adding 3 or more numbers, so commutative properties with 2, 3 or more numbers, you start to get into the associative property, and it says that you can group or add numbers in any order. So if you have, like we have way down here on the bottom, A plus B plus C. It doesn't matter if I add the A and the B first, then add C, Or if I decide to add the A and the B and the C first and then add A, or if I wanted to add the A and the C first and then add B later. It doesn't matter, you will still get the same value. And that's what we're saying there. So, time for examples. So the first example we are going to do is we're going to evaluate this expression, 1 divided by 5 times 14. But that's just order of operations. You guys just did that in the last section. The difference here is that it wants you to evaluate each expression and name the property in each step. So, there was a reason that last time I asked you to list or do one thing at a time. Is because at each step, it's going to fall under one of those properties that we just covered pretty quickly, I know. So you're going to have to state it. So, we have grouping symbols, but it's 1 divided by 5. That should probably go first. But wait a minute. 1 divided by 5, if we want, we can clean that up. Isn't that the same thing as this? Is that okay? Basically, did I change the problem? That means I took 1 divided by 5 written out horizontally, made it vertical here. That step, to me, we'll say is substitution property. The substitution property allowed me to switch out the pieces and not change the problem. Now this should be able to help me because now you notice that they're all multiplied. It's 1/5 times 5 times 14, right? So I'm actually going to use multiplication properties of real numbers here. But wait a minute. What's so special about these two numbers? They are what? To each other. They're not equal to each other because 5 is not 1/5. But they are reciprocals? Isn't that when I multiply? What happens when I multiply reciprocals again? They will equal 1. So, these two here, 1/5 times 5 over 1 would becomes 1. You guys agree with that? And then the reason is, going back here, it's not those, it's these ones. It's the multiplicative inverse. That's what you would have to write because they're inverses of each other, multiplication inverses. So, going back, the reason, multiplication inverse. That's the reason why. And then, what's 1 times 14? 1 times 14 is 14. That is the multiplication identity, because 1 times a number is its own number. And that comes from here on this one. Multiplication identity, where you multiply anything by 1, it's its own number.